Hi, everybody. My name's Tim Westbrook, and I am live here with Joe Capela. We are on the I Love Being Sober show, and grateful to be here. So, I have a friend named Robert, and Robert's brother was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and he was constantly using and constantly drinking, and he was living with Robert. And so finally, Robert, in the interest of just drawing hard boundaries and not being an enabler and not supporting his brother's drug addiction, Robert kicked him out of his house. He said, "Hey, if you're going to live with me, you can't drink, you can't use." And so Robert ended up kicking him out of his house. And within a couple months after that, Robert received a phone call, and Robert's a criminal defense attorney, and Robert received a phone call, and his brother had overdosed and died. And so the question is, and this is Robert's question in his mind: what could I have done differently? Was it right for me to draw those hard boundaries? If I let him continue living with me, maybe he would still be alive. And a lot of families out there have those questions. How can I best help my loved one? How can I best help my brother? How can I best help my son or my daughter? I don't want to kick my son or daughter out on the streets. And so today, I'm here with Joe Capela. He's an interventionist. He's been around for many, many years. I think you've been working in treatment close to 30 years, Joe. And we're going to talk about families and interventions and the family process, because it's a big topic and a big subject. And so I'm really grateful to be here on I Love Being Sober. I love being sober today. I love my life today. And thanks everybody for being here. And Joe Capela, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. And I also love being sober. I mean, if somebody told me my life would be where it's at today 30 plus years ago, I would have laughed at them, and I didn't get into recovery. I didn't wake up one morning and think, oh, I need to go to treatment today. I was intervened on by my family. My family was seeing things that I was not seeing in regards to, my denial and the disease and all of that. And so they intervened on me, and I'll be honest with you, I wasn't happy. My brother initiated an intervention on me, and brothers don't do that to brothers, and many times working with families and friends, friends will initiate an intervention. And actually it was a friend of mine that went to my brother, who then went to my family. I say I wasn't happy. I was pissed is what I was when they intervened on me. Probably a few days into treatment, I realized they saved my life, because I did not see the path my life was going. I was still in that denial and delusion that I can do this on my own. And I was far from being able to do it on my own, And I get that question asked a lot from families, concerned to setting a boundary. I have seen over the years families, and my family also was really, really good at setting boundaries. They just weren't really good at keeping those boundaries. And so I was able to work it, manipulate the situation. Whatever I needed to do to keep doing what I was doing. And really, it wasn't until they set those boundaries and kept them that I didn't change, then I got to a point of being willing to change. So I tell families many times, it's like, until something changes, nothing changes, and I always look at it this way. When a family calls me to obtain information, and I'll talk to families for free initially, I'll give them all the information I possibly can. I'll let them know how the intervention process is going to go. And typically in the process that I use, there's a boundary that is going to be set at some point, I shouldn't say that. If the individual refuses treatment, then we will go to a boundary. And I explained to the individual during the intervention process that this has nothing to do with you. This is what your family needs to do to take care of them, you know? So when families hire me basically to intervene on their loved one, what they're doing is hiring me to intervene on them. And if I can work with the family and make that shift in the family dynamic, the rest of it falls into place.
Right.
You know?
Before we get into it, Joe, I first want to learn a little bit about you. Tell me a little bit about you and where you came from, and you mentioned that you got intervened on. And so how'd you grow up? Where'd you grow up? And what happened during the intervention process? And then we'll talk about your I guess path through working in treatment and how you got to be an interventionist. Because another thing we're going to talk about is what should someone be looking for when they're looking to hire an interventionist? Like, what's important? Are all interventionists created equal? Like, what do you have? Like, what makes you different or better or worse than other interventionists out there, right? It's like, are all interventionists the same, or is there something, whether it be credentials, experience, how much experience, what type of credentials that somebody should be looking for when interviewing potential interventionists? So first, let's start by tell me a little bit about you and how where you grew up and so forth.
So I was born and raised in Northern California, up in the Bay Area. And, we remained up there until the company that my dad worked for, transferred to Central California. And so the family moved to Central California, and that's where I started. I did all of my grammar school, Northern California. I actually started my high school years when we moved. And looking back on it today, because I always look at it that today, looking back, with a different pair of glasses, that, substance use disorder did not run in my family. I didn't really pay attention so much that, my uncle died from an alcohol-related car accident. My parents never drank, and that's kind of what I focused it on, and we grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school, and, again, looking back on it today, the first time I ever got drunk, I stole a bottle of wine and a bag of Host from the back of the church. Mm-hmm. And I call it partying with God today. So I had that behavior, the ism, whatever you want to call it, back then, and this is as an adolescent, and grew up in a very good family. I mean, I love the neighborhood I grew up in. I mean, my parents my dad passed away last year, but they were together, married 68 years, So Central California is when I started experimenting more with substances, high school, and high school in the 70s for me was, Friday night party, go to the football game, and, back then it was either beer or Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, or, Mogan David 2020, or, the ones that we laugh about today. But that was it. And it wasn't all the time. Marijuana became an issue back then. For a lot of other people, I never liked marijuana. So smoked it very, frequently. It wasn't my thing. Graduated high school, got married, had 2 children, and still doing the party thing every once in a while with my friends, and then cocaine. This was in the early 80s, and cocaine was pretty much around everywhere then, but I never tried that because cocaine was a drug, and people who do cocaine have a drug problem. Drinking once in a while, well, I should say, back then it was drinking. It was they called them crosstops. They were a form of speed, white little pills. Would do those because I was always wanted to go fast. I was never one into a substance that would make me down, like smoking weed or opiates or things of that nature. That was not my thing. So went through a phase of, just still the partying, every maybe once a month, twice a month, something like that. Experimenting with different things, one time, and this was in probably the mid 80s, with my friends, drunk, and cocaine came out on the table again. And this time I tried it. And in my opinion, that was the beginning of the end. I just loved the feeling that drug gave me. And it was a downhill cycle, from then on, for probably the next 8 years, I was, doing cocaine starting at, and again, that was maybe a few times a week. Well, as we know, the disease progresses, and my cocaine use progressed. So from when I first started using cocaine, it was initially maybe once a month, maybe, $25 worth with a couple of my friends on a Friday night. And, over a period of about 8 years, that progressed to when I was finally intervened on. I had progressed from snorting cocaine to smoking cocaine to, before I went into treatment, I was using an average of probably $400 a day.
Wow.
And trying to maintain that with losing jobs and everything else was not easy.
When did you realize that you had a problem?
I didn't realize I had a problem. When my family intervened on me, I looked at it that I had a marriage problem and a financial problem, but I did not have a drug problem because I could stop in my mind. I'll quit tomorrow. The old saying, I'll quit tomorrow, or, the, addict prayer, God, get me out of this and I'll never do it again, which typically didn't last. So when my family intervened on me, I went to treatment. I did not go because I had a drug problem. I went because I had a marriage problem and a financial problem. While I was in treatment, I realized that my marriage problem and my family problem, or my financial problem, were a direct result of my drug problem.
When did your family know that you had a problem?
My wife, I was married now with 2 kids. Mm-hmm. My wife suspected that something was going on, and she felt like I was having an affair. And at some level, she was right. It just wasn't with another person. But she never said anything about it. What kind of got the ball rolling was a friend of mine, went to my brother. I have 2 younger brothers and 2 older sisters. Went to my brother and said, you need to do something with Joe because he's a train wreck. I worked from the time I got out of high school till I actually went into treatment. I worked in the automotive industry. I was, started out as a service writer in the service department of a car dealership. And at one point I was the youngest service manager, on the West Coast, for a Porsche Audi dealership. So I was good at what I did. It got to the point I just didn't like doing what I was doing anymore, but I was good. I made good money. I had a family, I had responsibilities. So I kept doing what I was doing. And then, cocaine just made me think I could do it faster. So basically a friend, went to my brother went to my family, and that initiated the intervention.
Okay. So you got intervened on and you went to treatment. How many times did you go to treatment?
I went to an outpatient program in 1986, around 1986. And it was a year-long program. My family intervened. my parents asked me if I had a drug problem, and I said no, but I was, partying, and they asked what I was using. Was it marijuana or cocaine? And I said marijuana because that, in my mind, was the lesser of the two evils.
Yeah.
And so I agreed to go. My wife, again, had no clue what was going on. She thought I was having an affair. So we brought it to her attention, went into an outpatient program, and that was a year-long program. I stayed clean and sober the first 4 days. I completed that year-long outpatient program, but not by any means remaining clean and sober. But my family, it got the heat off. My family thought, oh, he's doing a program now. He's doing good. Things are good, And I changed it up some to where I wasn't my crazy behavior. I guess I would say I switched it up to where it wasn't as evident to them anymore. Because now they're on me. You know what I mean? It was funny. I remember one time they accused me of using. And I, looked them straight in the eyes and I said, no, I have not been using anything. And they wanted me to go get a drug test. And so I said, that's fine. I will go get a drug test. I can't believe you people are accusing me of this. I'm doing so well, and basically shamed them to death to where they didn't test me. Nice. Had they tested me, I used before I walked in the door,
Yeah.
So, just ran the typical, I call it game that we do with our families to manipulate them and, continue getting what we're getting.
Right.
So, 3 years later, I was basically intervened on again, and I went into a residential program at that time. And that was June 5th of 1989. I've been clean and sober since then.
And so when did it finally get to a point where it was, because at first, and I don't know about you, like for me, I was I got clean and sober because I wanted to keep my wife at the time, and then it changed, and I decided to get sober for me. So
Right.
So for you, kind of what transpired? You were intervened on, you went to treatment, but you actually stayed sober. And what happened? Why do you think you were able to actually stay sober?
I went to treatment, like I said, to save my marriage. I went to treatment to save my marriage and to have my family bail me out financially one more time, by going to treatment. Well, I was in treatment. The staff there were, do you have a problem with drugs or alcohol? And I'd be like, no. And they're like, okay, you've lost your job. You've lost your family. You're financially in ruins. What's going on? So that, they started chipping away at my denial is what they did, and it's like, okay, I have a slight problem. And then I was able to accept the fact they were chipping away and I'm getting into some form of acceptance. Okay. I was able to accept the fact that cocaine was a problem. Still did not look at that I had a problem with alcohol because, again, I never really drank a lot. And especially towards the end, during my cocaine use, I really never drank a lot. I mean, if I drank 5 times a year, that was a lot. I didn't want to take anything that was going to upset my cocaine high, in a sense, you know what I mean? To bring me down. So I didn't look at it that I had a problem with alcohol whatsoever. So then they had me take a look at my alcohol consumption, and the first time I ever did alcohol, or the first time I ever did cocaine, I was extremely drunk, and went ahead and tried this, even though I'd been around it for years and was like, no, I'm not going to ever do that. If you do that, you have a problem. The fact that I would drink, basically a half a bottle to a bottle of NyQuil at night, that wasn't alcohol, in my opinion. So I would do my cocaine addict behavior, and okay, if I do this much cocaine right now, and if I drink this half a bottle of NyQuil right now, hopefully I can get a couple of hours of sleep before I have to get up and, try to go to work the next day. So, and I've seen a lot of that where we just try and balance things out, basically killing ourselves, with experimenting with different things to try and make us feel like we're doing okay. So in treatment, they chipped away, I got into some acceptance in regards to alcohol could be a slight problem also. My wife came to the family program. I went to treatment to save my marriage and financially get bailed out. My wife came to the family program, sat there with me and said, don't come home. I have filed for a divorce. So that just popped that bubble of why a motivating factor for me to go to treatment, So I sat there. This was day 26 of a 20. Back then it was a 28-day treatment program. Mm-hmm. This was day 26.
Wow.
And so
when you think you're almost free.
Yeah. I'm 2 days, man. I'm out.
Yeah. Right.
So I went ahead and said, well, I'm leaving today then against medical advice. Will you give me a ride home? And she said no. And I'm like, okay, I have enough money to, get a plane ticket home and I'll be home before you are. So I went back into the program, told my counselor I was packing my stuff and leaving. And my peers came to me and they said, can you at least say goodbye to us? And I thought, okay, you know what? I've spent 26 days with these people. I owe them that. And I went in to say goodbye to them. And I had an alcoholic addict from Texas, this guy I really respected that was one of my peers in treatment. And he looked at me and he said, when are you going to give up? When are you going to surrender? And being in and out of recoveries, for 3 years, going to in AA, different 12-step meetings, I've heard, and in treatment, I've heard the word surrender and for some reason that day I heard it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, I'll do whatever you wanted me to do. Prior to that, a few weeks prior to that, they had given me a recommendation for sober living. Back then they were called halfway houses. Now this treatment program that I went through, they were referring everybody to Newport Beach. I'm born and raised in California. Okay. They gave me 3 suggestions. They gave me Salt Lake City, Utah, Seattle, Washington, and Fargo, North Dakota. And I looked at my counselor and I said, it will be a cold day in hell I ever go to Fargo, North Dakota.
Right.
That day when my peer said, when are you going to give up? And I just found like some acceptance, a peace over me. And I said, I'll do whatever they want me to do. And I spent the next 45 days in Fargo, North Dakota.
Wow.
So I went from treatment to sober living in Fargo, and then back to California. And I got to tell you, looking back on that today, I just gave up. What do you want me to do? And was the best thing I could have ever done.
Surrender to the process and take suggestions. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I see in someone that's able to actually get this thing and achieve long-term recovery is they are willing to take suggestions.
Surrender and acceptance for me.
Your words, it's surrender. Mm-hmm. Surrender, accept, take suggestions. Mm-hmm. So what? And then what? So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. I know we're kind of against the clock. What led you to being an interventionist? So you got clean. So you get clean and sober. You do sober living. I guess what's next? What's next?
So when I got clean and sober, I see this a lot in people that go through treatment. They then some of them want to work in this field, So I looked back over my career working in the automotive field and again, did very well working in that field. But I didn't like what I was doing. And I remember going home and talking to my parents and telling, my dad worked at the same job for 40 something years. I'm like, Dad, I've had 40 jobs in 1 year. Okay. He worked at the same job since he was in his, teenager. Um, and so I said, I want to be a drug and alcohol counselor. I want to go back to school and I want to work in this field. And I had a goal. I wanted to go to work at the treatment center that I went through treatment at. And he's sitting there looking at me and goes, but you do so good, working in the automotive business, and you make great money and you do this. And that was the first time I think I've ever made a decision without, if it was up to him, I would have stayed working in the automotive field. That was my dad loved that, and I'm like, no, I don't like doing that. So I went back to school, went to college and got my drug and alcohol license. And I had a 5-year goal. My goal was, I knew that I could not work at this treatment facility until I had 2 years of sobriety. I knew that. So my 5-year plan was, I want to be able to be working there at 5 years, went back to school, got my drug and alcohol license, and actually went to work for the treatment program 1 week before my 2-year birthday, and did the orientation and the training and all of that. And my 2-year birthday, I actually worked in the hall that I got sober in, and I'm like looking back at these things, and it's just the miracle of the program, the miracle of recovery, because this was a 5-year plan and I just did this in 2 years, and left to my own devices, I'd have still been out there, So it's, again, following direction, putting one foot in front of the other, and doing what's in front of you. And it has been pretty much that way ever since, So I went to work, I actually went to work I went through treatment at the Betty Ford Center back in 1989. And that was back then actually one of the most inexpensive treatment centers around. So I was there. I worked there for 9 years, a little over 9 years. I then went and was a consultant for Eric Clapton's treatment program, Crossroads, in the West Indies. I did that, and then moved back and ran the outpatient drug-free program for the county where I live today, and I did that for 16 years.
And so, when did you start doing interventions, or why? What led you to being an interventionist?
I found interventions very interesting, and back in the early 90s, in the 90s, interventions there was very few interventionists, there was the Ed Storties, the John Southworths. There was, a handful of those that would intervene and bring people to Betty Ford Center when I was working there. And I always found that interesting. I've always loved working with people with substance use disorder. I find them very interesting. And the families, realizing the insanity that I put my family through. I was able to find, compassion for the families dealing with the same stuff that I put mine through. So then working for a residential treatment program, working there and doing interventions, I found to be a conflict of interest. So I never really pursued the intervention process because I was working in residential treatment. When I went to work for the county, we didn't have any residential treatment programs, so then I started to pursue the intervention piece of it just to kind of see what that would be like, and fell even more in love with it. Being able to work with families, to be able to work with, people with substance use disorder and get them, an opportunity for that miracle to happen for them, because I believe that the miracle can happen. There's no doubt in my mind, somebody's willing to do the work. I never dreamed my life would be where it's at today.
So let's talk to the family members right now. So if a family member has a loved one, like going back to my story about Robert, like what do they do? Because a lot of times I I see families and they say, okay, I think I know what we're going to do. And, I'm not going to call an interventionist. I don't want to pay an interventionist. Like, when is it time for someone to hire an interventionist, or at least explore hiring an interventionist?
I always look at it when they recognize there's a problem. Now, many families may have a loved one that has been in treatment before, and whatever led them to getting into treatment, the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth time, and I've worked with families that have had a loved one that have been in multiple treatments. I always look at it, first of all, if they have any questions, they can always call me. I'll be the first one to tell somebody, you don't need to do an intervention right now. Try this first, But typically if they have a loved one that has had failed treatments, or, somebody that continues to relapse, then I would look at taking it to a new level, bringing in a professional to facilitate that process for them, being able to express where they're at, in regards to what they see going on, in a very safe, facilitated process. I've had families call me up and say, you know what, we don't want to hire an interventionist. We want to try this on our own. What do you think? I'll be the first one to tell them what to do. I'll also be the first one to tell them it usually turns into a train wreck, and it does, right. Because what happens is typically the person they're intervening on will engage in an argument at some level, and a family member will then engage in that argument also, and you've just lost everything you're working for. My approach in intervening is strictly out of love and concern. There's no shaming, no blaming, none of that.
And I like what you said. The time to call an interventionist is as soon as there's a problem. And you, like you just said, I mean, and I know lots of other interventionists that have the same response as you, which is just call me, call the interventionist, and ask questions. Hey, do you have a recommendation for me? Call more than one interventionist.
Absolutely.
And if you have an the interventionists, the good interventionists that I know of, are going to say, you don't need an intervention right now. You don't need an intervention right now.
Right.
Or I would recommend an intervention.
Right.
And that's, to your point. It's like a lot of times a family member, to try to do this intervention on their own, they're going to lose everything that they've been working for. They've got this. Why, in your opinion, why is it not a good idea for a mom or a dad or a brother or a sister or someone that's close to the person with the addict that has the problem? Why is it not recommended for the family member to do the intervention on their own?
Usually by the time they call me, they've already attempted that. They've already talked to their loved one. They've already expressed their concern. They've already, set boundaries, but have not kept those boundaries.
Right.
So typically by the time I get that initial call, they've done it, and I assess with the family kind of the dynamics of what's going on. And I like to talk to all of the people who are participating in the intervention, because many times they all have a different perception of what's going on. A husband or a wife that's living with this person may have, our partner may have a different perception in regards to the parents who live out of state, or family members, brothers or sisters. So I like to talk to all of them and assess the whole situation, then come up with the best plan of what's going, the best way to approach this. But again, by the time they call me, they have usually done that. Or many times I'll get phone calls where they're like, we didn't even know this was an option. What is an intervention? Families are too close, usually. The dynamic is too close. So when a family tries to do it on their own, either the person will manipulate it and change it up some and keep doing what they're doing, or it blows up into an argument. So if a family needs, in my opinion, needs to have a professional there to facilitate the process, I will tell them that. Sometimes they'll try it on their own first. Then they'll call me up and they'll say, okay, Joe, we tried this and it didn't work. Now can you come in and intervene? Well, yes, you can, but you just kind of destroyed a perfect opportunity. Because now a week or two later, when we go in and intervene, and the person's like, you guys just did this last week. I told you no then, it's still no. You know, you have a perfect window of opportunity many times to get everything in place and have it done in what I call right, you know, or in a professional manner. And sometimes you can lose that window of opportunity. Not that it can't be done, it's just more difficult.
Right. It just makes it harder.
Yeah.
Makes it more difficult. It's like you've already made the attempt. And by the way, this is live. If anybody out there has a question for Joe about the family process or interventions, please post in the comment section. So the next question I have for you, Joe, what should a family look for in an interventionist?
I always look for somebody who has worked in the field, has been trained in interventions, and nowadays there's a lot of different trainings that are available out there. But somebody who is a trained interventionist, has been doing this for, you know, a good period of time, knows how to work with families, you know, when things start to go sideways, and they typically don't, but they can. I'm a licensed independent substance abuse counselor, a registered addiction counselor, and a certified addictions treatment counselor. And I've had those 3 licenses for the better part of 30 years, you know, and have worked in the field, again, like I say, for, you know, the better part of 30 years. So somebody who has experience doing this, again, the intervention world is wide open right now. There's a lot of people who do, you know, trainings out there, and you take their specific training and then bam, you automatically think you're an interventionist, but don't have anything under your belt. You know what I mean? To move forward with that. And it can be disastrous at times. You know, you brought up the situation with your friend. And many times I have family members ask me or say, you know, I'm concerned that if we set a boundary that, you know, they're going to kill themselves. And that is always a possibility. You know, it doesn't happen very often. Thank God in the last, you know, 29 years, it has not happened, you know, with the families that I have worked with during the intervention process. But the reality of it is they're killing themselves anyway. They're just doing it in your house. You know, to set a boundary to say, you know, I'm sorry you're refusing this gift we're offering you today, or this help we're offering you, but you can no longer stay in the house, or, you know, a spouse, you know, partner to their partner saying, you know, I'm sorry that, you know, you're not accepting this help, but, you know, you need to leave, or I'm going to leave, is setting a pretty firm boundary. That is a very solid boundary. Now, could that person go out and overdose and die? Absolutely. It happens. Overdoses happen every day, unfortunately, you know, with this disease. Are they doing that in the house with them right now? Absolutely. You know, if they're sitting there shooting heroin in the bathroom, or, you know, me smoking crack cocaine in the garage with my wife and 2 kids in the house, you never know, you know. But again, if nothing changes, nothing is going to change.
Well, yeah, and I think it's like, I think about Robert, and it's like, okay, by setting the boundary and kicking his brother out of his house, he gave him a chance, right? He gave him a chance, because he either stays in his house and he kills himself slowly, or Robert kicks him out, or a parent, you draw a boundary, you kick your loved one out, and they're either going, you know, now they at least have a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is kind of the way I look at it. They have
Well,
a
and
chance.
yeah, I look at it that there is not a failed intervention. Now I'm not going to, I can tell you 95% of the time they will go to treatment during the intervention. But they're an adult. It has to be their choice. And there's that 5%, 10% chance that they're going to say, to heck with you guys, I'm not going. I'm going to do this on my own, you know? So before we leave, before we, wrap up that intervention that day, just because the person doesn't go to treatment that day doesn't mean the intervention's over. I can tell you that. We have definitely ruined their drinking or using. They will have all of my information, the person that we're intervening on. And I let them know, you know what, here's my card, here's my number, call me anytime, So they may not go to treatment that day, but typically if a family keeps their boundaries, not just sets them, but keeps them. And I tell all the family members, probably the same day or within a few days, your loved one is going to call you and say, hey, mom, dad, I want to come home just to talk to you, or, call their significant other, Your response can be, I love you. I don't know how to help you. Call Joe. Put it back on me. I may be already back home, but if the family sticks with that, they will eventually call me, and then I re-engage with them. And it's like, okay, let's get you the help you need and get your life started, give you an opportunity for a new life.
Love it. All interventions don't look alike.
Right. Well, that's true.
Right. Okay. So once somebody finds an interventionist and they stay engaged with the interventionist, so, and I guess tell me about you and how your intervention process works.
So I'm trained I started with the Johnson model, which is many, many years ago. So I've been trained in the Johnson model, the Storti model, and the 𝐟𝐸𝐬𝐷 model. So there is and again, I base it on, after assessing the family and finding out the dynamics that are going on, I'm going to determine what is going to be the best approach to intervene on this individual. So the Storti Johnson, I utilize the Storti Johnson Capela model, because as an interventionist, we all put our own twist on what works for us and works, best for the family. So those are more of what I would call a surprise model intervention or a crisis intervention, where the individual is not aware that we're going to be coming in one day and, sitting with them and expressing our love and concern, and offering them a solution. The other model is there's the 𝐟𝐸𝐬𝐷 model, invitational model, where basically we let them know we're coming in. We all want to meet, and discuss things that are going on in the family. And some of this has to do with your substance use disorder, and we want you to be there. So we're inviting them to be there the day of the intervention. So again, depends on the family dynamics is going to be the process that I'm going to utilize that's I feel will work best with the family. And then the other piece of it is I typically will give the family recommendations, because this is truly a family disease. I was the identified person in my family, but it affected my brothers, my sisters, my parents, my friends, my wife, my kids. They may not have been drinking or using, but this disease affected all of them. So I like to bring the whole family into recovery. So giving them some tools that they can utilize, which may be, going into counseling themselves, doing some of their own work, Al-Anon, Alateen, family programs that are available out there to give them, an understanding of the disease and how it's been affecting their lives.
What do you think? What is how important is it for the family to go and seek their own support and their own help? Because I know you hear this all the time, is a family member says, well, it's not, I'm not the problem. Like, he's the problem. Right. He's the drug addict. He's the alcoholic. He's the one causing the problem. He needs help. I don't need help. How important is it for the family members to go out and get their own support?
I
Their own
think it is extremely important. I have found one for family members to get better educated on substance use disorder, and many times mental health. Family members just don't know how to deal with that. So looking at the substance use disorder, they look at it that just send little Bobby off to treatment and everything is fine. No, it's not. So I think it's extremely important that they go and get educated, and you cannot live, in my opinion, with an addict or an alcoholic without it impacting your life at some level, but for them to go out and get, their own recovery. I have found with couples, that if we, for me personally, I will work my recovery program. My wife will work hers. When I try and work her program for her, that goes bad real fast, or she tries to work mine. But if we both work our own, the relationship takes care of itself. So I highly recommend families to get some family counseling, individual counseling. Again, their own support group if that works for them. Whatever the case may be.
Does it increase the chances that the identified alcoholic or addict is going to achieve positive results or a successful process if the family gets help? Does it increase the odds in your experience?
It depends on the dynamics that are going on. I mean, if I were to come home to a partner who is still smoking crack, the chances of me staying clean and sober and in that relationship are not good. If we're dealing with two people that have substance use disorder, they both need to get into recovery. It would be very difficult to remain in that relationship with somebody who is actively using, for me. The other piece of that is my recovery is my responsibility. So I need to make a decision if that is going on. Do I want to stay in this relationship? I just think that families getting the educational piece on the disease and how it affects them, so that they can find, just as with the addict and alcoholic, some acceptance and some forgiveness. Many times in our active addiction, we don't do the best things, you know what I mean? And to find some acceptance in that for the family, it's going to take some counseling for them. So I can't say that it improves, what the statistics are on that. But I know I couldn't live in that situation if it was going on. So
Right. And then what about support after the actual intervention? What does that look like? Just to finish off with your services, what is from start to finish?
I'm available to the families for up to 6 months after the intervention, by phone, text, email, depending on where they live and where they are, because I'll travel wherever I need to go, national, international, wherever I need to go to assist families with the process. So I'm available to them. My recommendation for treatment, ideally is 60 to 90 days for the individual. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen all the time, and especially if people are insurance dependent, we're lucky if we can get 30 days in primary treatment. But then I always look for, sober living, intensive outpatient, things of that nature, for them to stay focused and engaged in their recovery. I'm a big advocate of the case management piece and, staying and keeping them engaged as long as we possibly can. That always gives the best results. The 28-day treatment programs, I just see the longer they stay engaged, the better chance they're going to have of long-term recovery.
Always. So doctors, dentists, and airline pilots, they're monitored for 5 years.
Right.
The success rate, according to Dr. Michael Sucher, I believe is about 86%.
Right.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's really good compared to the less than 10% are able to stay clean and sober for a year if they go to treatment for 28 days.
Right.
Those are the statistics that I can recall. So how can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your services?
CapelaInterventions.com is my website. My phone number is area code 760-408-8746. Capela Joe at JO@yahoo.com. And I don't do the Capela Interventions at whatever.com. If you call me, you're not going to get the recording. This is Joe Capela with Capela Interventions. And I do that a lot because of my own history. When I was out drinking and using, I was pretty much scanning every phone call, conversation, anything I could find on my family, checking to see if they were checking up on me or what they were doing. So I try and keep it as confidential as I can in regards to that, because if my wife had looked at, checked a message and, this is Joe Capela from Capela Interventions, I'm like going to come up with a new plan on how to manipulate that. Okay. So,
Yep. These
But,
alcoholics and drug addicts in their addiction are smart, manipulative, deviant.
yes.
Absolutely.
And,
Joe,
and I let all my families know, that when they reach out to me, whether they utilize my services or someone else's or, do an intervention or not, until they're ready to, until they make a decision that they're ready to move forward, because I know what I put my family through, that they can call me anytime. I talk for free, so I have no problem helping families, directing them, do whatever I can do to help, and again, like I said, I'll be the first one to tell you don't need to do an intervention right now. Try this first, then we'll see where it goes. So
awesome. Well, Joe, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate you, and
I appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you guys are doing. So
Thanks.
great. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.